Let's talk New Orleans Saints. A lot of times, great writers spur thoughts. Nick Underhill, NewOrleansFootball.com. Go check it out. See if you want to subscribe. Or NewOrleans.football. Either one works. He had just a little interesting piece, a paragraph in a larger kind of collection of little thoughts on Cesar Ruiz and the idea of him being on the clock. And it makes sense because in Ruiz, you're talking about a first-round pick. First-round picks are expected to play immediately. They're expected to do well immediately. Eric McCoy at center is a high draft pick last season, did very well immediately. He was the most second penalized center in the league, but outside of those penalties, which makes sense for a young guy, he was really good. And so a lot of people were kind of scratching their head, well, why'd you go back to the well again? You thought McCoy already filled that void. Why'd you go get Ruiz? And the answer becomes because you're trying to maximize Drew Brees this season. Maybe the last chance. And you're trying to squeeze every drop of production out of him that you can. And so Sean Payton says that Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy are going to rotate at center throughout this training camp period, if you can call it that. We'll figure out who will win the job. We've just kind of been assuming that Ruiz will. I think no preseason game kind of throws a wrench into that. As Peyton alluded to, it's going to be very hard to evaluate now. They're going to have to up the intensity of practice. Try to make those calls there. It also is really tough on Ruiz, the same way that a weird offseason's hurting Miles Brennan. Imagine being a college kid who's the first-round pick of an NFL team that believes that it's Super Bowl bound, and you are the guy who has to make all the calls for the Hall of Famer that's been doing it for 20 years. You are the kid that has to be ready to go week one to protect Brees first and foremost, on top of knowing everything to do, making all the calls to the vets, and you got all pro guys on your right and your left. It's a lot of pressure for Ruiz. And whoever does win that job, be it McCoy or Ruiz, maybe one of them ends up at guard, maybe Nick Easton ends up winning a guard job. The bottom line, whoever does, it's going to be critical to the overall success of the season. It may sound weird, but in this Saints offense, that position can have an undue impact on the team as a whole. If Drew Brees has had one kryptonite throughout his career, it's been interior pressure. Now, to be fair, it's a great way to beat any QB. Like, I don't care who you are, that's a great way to beat them. But it is especially effective against Drew Brees because his physical skill set, right? He is a bit shorter. Interior pressure makes those lanes even harder to find. He has a relative lack of mobility. I still dream about that spin move against the Falcons from a couple years ago. That said, that's the exception, not the rule. And so when you get pressure from the inside, you can shut Brees down, right? Look at the Vikings game last year. Look at the pick in overtime that ended the Rams game. Interior pressure. And really think about that Vikings game last season. I got an argument earlier, top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. And Emil in the chat trying to put my guy, though, but still trying to put Tom Brady at number 5 instead of Drew Brees. Absurd. What did Tom Brady do last year that Brees did not do better? I mean, look at last December. This was going into the playoffs, going into that Vikings game. In the month of December, Drew Brees was NFC Offensive Player of the Month. He completed 75% of his passes for 1,188 yards, 15 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, a 137 quarterback rating. He only got sacked 3 times in 4 games. He was on fire. He was playing as good as anybody in the NFL. And then what happened? You get to the wild card round. He gets sacked 3 times in 1 game, throws 1 touchdown and a pick, and that QB rating drops 47 points to 90. Why? Because of interior pressure. Why is Larry Warford no longer on the team? A lot of the reason is because of that game. It's the same reason why years ago the Saints went out of their way to trade for Max Unger. They sacrificed so much of the altar of Jarris Byrd, and then for a while there, they kind of felt like, okay, Brees will mask any O-line deficiencies that we have, and they were proven to be incorrect. Those are the times when Brees struggled most in his career. So you went out and you made sure to get Max Unger. And now they went out and they drafted McCoy super high. And they drafted Cesar Ruiz super high. Why? Because they're trying to maximize their best piece. And even as old as he is, ultimately, just because of the nature of football and how quarterback-centered it is, Drew Brees will decide where this team goes. So protecting him on the inside, it's going to be critical. And when you want to win the Super Bowl, and look, if when you want to win the Super Bowl, the bar is high. And so Cesar Ruiz, you're a rookie. You've had a weird offseason. It's been tough to train. Maybe you've been doing like Zoom calls with the team. You didn't get OTAs. You didn't get rookie minicamp, but none of that matters. The season's still happening. The train is hurtling down the tracks. And as Teron Armstead said yesterday, the Saints have a Super Bowl on the mind. Can Cesar Ruiz figure it out? It's going to be one of the critical questions of this pseudo training camp. We'll have to wait and see.